Ben is director and producer, multi-Emmy nominated producer and director, one half of the Soho-based outfit Bill and Ben Productions, whose credits include Nevermind the Sex Pistols, Mockingbird, Chemical Wedding, Monty Python, the successful Monty Python, Almost the Truth, The Lawyer's Cut, and upcoming feature about Matt Busby, starring Brian Cox, called Believe. Justin Weyers, who was animation producer on this film, runs a company called Made Visual Studio, which specializes in animation, design, production, branding. Interestingly, in his bio, he said that despite working on a number of unusual projects in his career, from page 3 models to Russian oligarchs, this film, nothing prepared him for this film, the animated 3D biopic, which merged 3D styles, 17 styles of animation into one story narrated by a dead man.
This is true.
I'm not sure what prepares you for that exactly,
Page
but
3 models don't.
it's a wonderful film. You must see it if you haven't. Extremely comic and visually really entertaining. We're going to see a few clips, but initially, just want to get a little background on how this project came together. This unusual project. Where did the idea come from, and also obviously where did the idea for it to be in 3D come from?
I'm Ben, and basically I'm one of 3 directors, I have to be honest. So there are 2 other directors, Jeff Simpson and my business partner Bill Jones. And actually the project came to us because Jeff Simpson, who used to work at the BBC for 20 years, he'd escaped. And he basically was a documentary filmmaker, and he did a film about comedian Marty Feldman. And he was really interested in Graham Chapman, who's the dead one from Monty Python. And he was interested because he kind of Graham's an interesting character because, as Jeff puts it, you know, he's openly gay but secretly alcoholic man, which was kind of, you know, but obviously he was part of Monty Python, but then he had this sort of other life. And so he really wanted to do a documentary about Graham, and he went down to meet David Sherlock, who appears in the film, and who's Graham's partner of 20 years. And he met him to sort of see if there was any home movies or any really interesting stuff, and there basically wasn't. But as he was leaving, David said, "Oh, there's the tapes." And Graham Chapman, he wrote a book called A Liar's Autobiography, which he co-wrote with 5 other writers. That shows you how much of a lie it was, including Douglas Adams. And his point about an autobiography really is that the worst person to write an autobiography is the person themselves. But within it, it's a brilliant book, and it's full of, you know, surrealism, fantasies. It's tonally shifts and it jumps between all kinds of things. So within it are all these amazing concepts that are going on, but there are truths within it somewhere that he does try and get across. Anyway, he recorded this as an audiobook, an early audiobook, kind of before audiobooks existed. He's mates with the rocker Harry Nilsson, who he used to get completely pissed with in LA. Or I'm not actually, I think he'd given up booze by then. But anyway, and he went into his studio and they recorded this over 3 nights. And these tapes had really been lost. So Jeff found these tapes and had the idea that you could still do a documentary, but parts of it could be narrated by Graham from these tapes. And then he brought this to me and Bill, and we'd just finished the documentary series on Python. And these little bits of his narration he thought could be animation, could be moments of animation. And me and Bill thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to animate and adapt the whole book? And then, because the book's full of scenes where Graham performs all the different roles, obviously, like, you know, there's scenes with him and his mum and dad and scenes with him with the Pythons, we thought that we could take out Graham performing as his mum and dad or John Cleese and replace that with the Pythons. So we could effectively put the Pythons in scenes with Graham 20 years after his death and then animate the film. And so that was really the concept.
3D?
Well,
came up with
the
that
first
idea? Why was that? Why
3D,
was that
a gimmick. I mean, the reality was 2 years ago. I mean, the first big step was that, and then the next big step was to think, wouldn't it be great to do it in different animated styles? Because the book goes tonally, shifts so dramatically into different places, dreams upon, you know, that go on in Graham's strange mind. We really wanted to focus and to do something which really pushed that. I mean, it's experimental, the reality of it. Me and Bill had been working with Justin on our own documentaries. We'd been creating these kind of
transitional animations.
Yeah, these sort of these moments in the documentary, like little chapter headings, and we started to do them within different styles, which was kind of what we'd started to do on our early documentaries on Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen and stuff like that. So we were kind of going in that direction, weren't we? And then, so that was the one big step. And then the other step, really on the 3D, I have to be completely honest, I went to see Avatar, obviously, who didn't? And I remember watching it and thinking the best bit was the opening titles. I loved how they kind of sat up really nicely, and the tech, you know, kind of they sat up, and there was, and I started to think about the textures of that, the fact that you, when you do sort of actually cut out layers, how that is quite beautiful in its own way, and a different sort of immersive approach. And then I thought, well, we need to raise the money, so we. We basically pitched it to a broadcaster in the US as a 3D film, thinking that's what a 3D broadcaster.
You did pitch it, and not even knowing how to make it at that point.
Yeah, so
so we had no idea.
I mean, there was a lot of no ideas going on. Never made an animated film. Never really worked in so many different styles, and never done stereoscopic. So there was a lot of stupidity involved in or naivety to get it going.
I think what was interesting was. This conference was run 2 years ago at Ravensbourne, Storytelling 3D, and and I went along, and it was the first time that I'd kind of engaged with a 3D audience and looked at cameras, and I was like, oh, this is very interesting, and that was my first introduction to 3D. Like I'd seen Avatar and Pina and Justin Bieber's 3D film and all this kind of stuff.
Just kind of,
Who didn't?
Just trying to immerse myself in what it was we were doing, but even before we creatively knew the process. And our budgets or anything, just trying to see what was happening out there.
I think really it was the film is trying to get you into his weird brain for 85 minutes. And the idea that 3D could make it just maybe a little bit more immersive or a bit more strange was also exciting. But anyway, we pitched it, and they said yes straight away. It was like, yeah, we're looking for...
Who said yes?
Am I allowed? So we pitched it to 3Net, and they said, yeah. This is we pitched it through a guy that works with us in the US, a sort of agent, a sort of anyway, and they loved it. And then they were at that time they were saying we really want something different type of content. Obviously, the Pythons being involved is a big pull, but obviously we wanted something different. And then they read the script. And, because Graham is the story is extremely adult. I mean, he doesn't
very honest.
He was a very horny man. I think that's the best way to describe it. And he doesn't hold back. And also his views on religion and overpopulation and everything. It's all in there. And so we had this situation where actually they really wanted to do it, and we even kind of taught them through the most overly sexual bits, and they were cool with it. And then I think it just, when it went up, I don't know, they realised, they basically came back and said, well, actually, you can't say these things, you can't do these things. And then we realised that it wasn't going to work because, for us, we also needed creative control of the film. Because it's so out there. You can't really have those sort of discussions on an experimental film where you're making it with 14 different animation studios. You just can't get into that. You've got to sort of be able to just go for it. And then we went to another broadcaster, Epix, who are smaller, but in the US as well. And they said, absolutely. And they backed it 100%. So they ended up really funding the whole thing with a UK distributor here, Trinity. So that's what happened.
Where did the education in 3D come from then? As
well, there's I think the 3D side of it was something that, like, I'm an animator by trade, and I don't know, technically wise, I can go as technical as you want into this discussion or be out of it, but as an animator, we all probably want to know how to make stereoscopic, and we see the big films and we think all the big post houses, that's what they do, and kind of I was, you know, these animation styles was also a what if, you know, a wonderful style of animation of oil on glass or sand, or, you know, how the hell do you do that in stereoscopic? And that was kind of where I started, and we didn't, at the point of the stereoscopic learning, and we didn't know who we were going to commission, how many companies we were going to commission. The film was broken up into kind of chapters in a way, and the styles, like I approached about 100 companies, and it's ones that I'd want to work for. So it was kind of a really wonderful experience to go, hey, I've got this really interesting project, you want to do it? And they, and we came back to all about 60 companies. You know, the price wasn't right. They had other projects on. They couldn't fit in the time scale. Or some other companies came back and said the content was vile. So I'm like, oh, fair enough. You don't want to do that one then. And
it's all right. You could be offended.
It's fine.
It's right to be offended.
Yeah. The film is, you know, it's like Vegemite, isn't it? Or Marmite over here. It's kind of 50-50. And you love it or you hate it, kind of thing. So these companies, gave these companies an opportunity to learn stereoscopic. So here I am saying this, and I didn't even know stereoscopic. So, but I wanted to learn together. So it was kind of you don't get these opportunities in big feature films where you're just like a little cog in the wheel. Like, it was very much, we all sat around a table and we had mood days, and the directors would work with them, and each company had their own animation director of their sequence, and they have their vision, and the two of them together would work it out. And I was kind of the buffer between the animators and the directors. Just in, you know.
Not the fluffer, sorry.
I was
too early.
I was in between. I was in between the two, just to make sure that what they were saying was, you know, the animators weren't going to take offence by, and it was such a learning side, and we had to develop about 15 different workflows of stereoscopic animation, and you know, we didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't kind of spend loads of time working massively on it. You know, you could do this in 2D and it still is a massively creative, ambitious project. So the fact to do it in 3D was I don't know, it just happened. And I think organically we just grew into it. So we you know, I asked as many people as I knew, interested, do you want to be involved, do you want to help, do you want to not? Vision 3D, you know, kind of different, just try to approach everybody. Well, out of all the companies, one company said they knew about 3D, but they were lying. So
when we commissioned, we ended up with our 14 companies, but then one of them, as you said, it's like, oh yeah, we can do 3D, and then we realised they were lying.
So we have 14 companies doing the all different styles, and in the end, some of the companies represent multiple directors in the animation world, is how it works. So so basically, we have 17 different styles of animation, from CGI, complete CGI environments done in something like Softimage or Maya or 3D Studio Max, whatever it is. Then we have cell animation, kind of old school, frame by frame rate. And then we have oil on glass. Then we did some stop motion. Then we just tried everything, really. And we didn't want to, when we worked with the companies, we didn't want to, the 3D you could be scared and run away from and think, oh no, I should be paid a lot more, or I can't do this kind of thing. But it was very important that it wasn't scary. We were all in the same boat. We were all learning. And basically, I developed a 80-page Bible on every way of making 3D that I could find. Here you go, read that. Your style might fit into that transition. And slowly but surely, we developed a workflow.
Who are some other companies you worked with?
Yeah, there's companies as big as a company called Superfad here in New York, who do things like the Super Bowl ads and stuff like that. Big company. To
Stephen Lau, one guy in his mum's kitchen
in
Oxford while she makes chapatis, doing
And
a whole section. So it goes from it literally goes from that gamut down to.
So one man into teams. Studios. We're going to show a clip in a sequence.
Yeah,
I don't know. Has anyone seen the film? Or there's a couple here.
Oh,
That's
okay.
interesting. Cool. We're going to show a little bit. We've got a few clips to show. One is the opening Oscar Wilde, a little bit of the Oscar Wilde going into 3 or 4 transitions, and you know, I can talk about this, how we made those, maybe a little bit after. Where do you start with something like this? Basically, the Oscar Wilde sequence, the opening, is so the guy actually built a model, a set. A guy called Chris Ketchell, not to scale, built the model, then locked off his camera and shot left and right eyes for the cameras to get the background. So he had left and right, his 3D elements. And then within the scene, he put his After Effects characters within it. So a lot of the workflows were done in Adobe After Effects, from kind of some started in Flash, Photoshop, and then into After Effects, and then we edited the whole thing in Premiere Pro and exported it out. So our workflow, and that was it. We can export straight to DCP from Premiere. So as far as an independent, small budget film, we went to a post-production house at the end, on site at the end, mainly because I had a big screen and to QC it. I only had a 50-inch, and that's how we did it on. But that was a long time to get those things right. But that first Oscar Wilde was probably the most difficult way of doing 3D, where you'd shoot your left and right and you're set. I don't know why we did it like this. It was a test. We wanted to try something different again, and then built. So put your 3D characters within the scene by eye into judgment. Sometimes have to mask things off, put things in front. So and then they shot an audience. You can see sitting down from the angle. That was one style. We had lots of problems with that one. To be honest, I would advise doing it that way. But in the end, this guy, the animator of that style, was he's a puppet animator. So he wanted it very raw. He didn't want to make it CG and so forth. It was the feel of it. He wanted to be very rough and ready. So it was kind of, think of that, which goes into the bit where he gets sucked out and up into space. So it's that style, in my mind. There's a big sequence at the end called Space Pods. If you look at 3D, what was really important is that the animation styles, which these animators have been working in for years, they develop their own character, their own empathy for the character. That style is kind of a cartoonist style without, kind of key line drawings and stuff like that. Instead of, we actually rebuilt the whole thing in CG, so that was all done in Studio Max. But for me, I think it's the nicest style that still keeps a traditional 2D element to it, but in a 3D environment, if that kind of makes sense. That's I think that's one of my favourite sequences. We're not going to show the whole sequence, but that part there, and then went into, where did we go into there? Oh, the vomit.
No, where we go into...
into the airplane, and that's all done in Flash and After Effects.
And he built a lot,
we'll talk about the other clip I've shown where he develops perspective and stuff. But, it was a big learning curve of, these companies who would do their own style of animation. If you made it 3D, you would look at the 3D, not the caricature of their animation. So that was really important. And, the animation isn't wet in your face. It's more just, when we see animation films these days, 85 minutes is quite a long time, unless it's not like Pixar where the stories the story is interesting, but it's not beautifully and evolving like we wanted to do. So it was very important that Ben said before, to create that little 10% of immersion within it, just to keep your attention in there and feel like you're evolved in the scene. And it could be cut out, and it was a nice little nod to kind of the Terry Gilliam-esque world of animation, which is all kind of layers, and and there's another style later which kind of illustrates that better. But he vomits, and then that's done in Studio Max, and then the next one with the pram and going with the pipe as a baby, all done in Maya. That company are illustrators, so we just work with the illustration companies to develop it. So it's quite nice.
I want to talk about which you found most challenging in a 3D aspect, but let's look at another clip. Take us through some of the challenges you faced.
I suppose what was very interesting, like the Scarborough scene, obviously all done in a CG program. I thought the CG thing would be one of the easiest ones to do. In the end, we had a lot of problems with that. A lot of problems with their rendering process by twos, pumping out of twos. And their rendering farms, however they render their software, they weren't baking all the information. So all the kind of the water and everything like that was that we had problems in left and right eye, and you didn't actually see a lot of that stuff.
I don't know what he's talking about.
So no, we had. It was really yesterday. I was listening to the guy at Wreck-It Ralph talk, and he was saying how many head count he had on the different projects, and our technical crew for this was a head count of 2, me and another guy Andy who I met who was a student. So we made it. So it was quite that. Any problems and stuff, we just did it. So I think in a way this kind of project kind of really proves that you can make it. It's not the most amazing CG in the world. It's not the most amazing 3D, but it works. There's things that really work. I'm amazed, to be honest, that we're sitting here talking at this interesting creative summit. I think the word creative, is quite cool for it. The fact that this is one of the most interesting creative projects I think you'll ever get your hands involved in. And and 2 years ago I was just a person just never touching 3D, and now we've just made this.
How long did it take you to make?
We were on it for 2 years.
Yeah.
2
It's
years.
also important to know that Justin also created, because all these animation studios, they're all competitors. I mean, and they don't talk, you know, getting them to talk to each other was also a challenge. And Justin created a website called Project Chapman 3D, and the website was for them to all talk and work out their problems with Justin.
When I went to that
which was
stereoscopic
amazing.
conference, there was a lot of people talking about cameras and all this kind of stuff, but no one really knew about what I was trying to do. So, you know, Pixar was still, you know, they were talking about bringing out Lion King and this kind of thing. It was really interesting in 3D, but this was I couldn't find any information on it. So we would spend 3 months and create this Bible, and then we created these tutorials. So if you wanted to make 3D in Maya, you could do it, or in this. And, you know, the Adobe, we got a lot of support from Adobe. I was sitting there at 4 in the morning and saying, it wasn't working. And I called them up at 9 a.m. the next morning after 10 phone calls, got through their sales team and said, you guys should be involved in this project. And we got everybody on the same workflow, so we did all the compositing in After Effects and then edited everything on an Adobe timeline. So they gave us all software, and we edited the whole thing on one HP workstation, Z800, and with a very fast graphics card in there, and utilising, we started in CS4 and we ended in CS6. We were beta testing that at the end. We wished that was available at the beginning, but we developed stereo rigs in After Effects, which we then worked with the Adobe team over in America, who then built that into their next kind of version. So the whole thing was a learning experience, and we made that website just to share as much as, because there was nowhere to find information. So we're like, let's try this. And
so we had this sort of workstation at Justin's studio, and then basically we moved from that at the very end to work with on-site in their Mystica, just really to do the final.
We had to do a final depth grade and in and out cuts and stuff like that. And, you know, I was shit scared, to be honest. Like, I'd been in my little dark room for weeks just going, well, is this going to be okay? And then taking on my left and right renders, my exports and DPXs wherever I do it. And then the on-site guys went, what did we have? We had 4 fixes in an 82-minute feature film. Like, we did we were on-site for a day and a half, and that was it.
Wow.
So it was quite nuts.
After your experience working on the 3D side on this, how readily would you run to do another 3D?
Run away? No. No, we'd be totally up for doing it.
I'd do this again with another 15 different animation companies, changing you'd have a completely different look of a film. So, because stylistically it would change. There's how long have we got? We've got to wrap up, or how long we've got?
I want to take a couple of questions if there are any, but I've got a few more of my own as well.
I had another clip, but it's okay. Don't worry, we can. You have to watch the film.
You have to watch the film. Because I want to get it out there in case there are any questions. Anyone have anything they want to ask in particular? Yes, madam.
Out of interest, it's a bit of an ignorant question here, but when you took it into Mystica, did you then do the depth, working out the screen space? Did you do was all the convergence done?
I did
in
all
the
that
online?
in Adobe, in After Effects.
Okay, so that was already pre-done,
Animator were working while they were building the sequence. They were also working, within it.
They basically, everybody worked in 3D. So we bought, with help from Skillset actually, we approached them because of the whole training side of the project. We got every company a very small 22-inch 3D screen, and that's what they used to check everything on. And then they would book in time at my studio, which had a 47-inch screen, and we would work together. So the whole 3D side of it was throughout the project. It wasn't like retro-convert at the end. And then when we went to on-site, it was just basically to see if anything popped up on a 15-feet screen. So, but what we could do obviously is once everything's rendered, we could play back in real time and see if things jump out and kind of push things back at the end or bring things forward a bit more if we wanted to. We more kind of played the 10 frames and the in and out point. That's where we kind of softened the blow on some of the transitional stuff on the editing. But yeah,
I mean, on-site then obviously went to do all the work that we need to do to finish the film in terms of delivering it and all that work, and they were very supportive.
Yeah, I can't do that in my little space.
Is there anything you'd change about the piece? Is there anything upon reflection where you'd go, actually, I'd maybe do this or do this differently? Is there anything that you would...
Well, we were just discussing about that.
We were talking about that over a cup of tea.
Yeah.
I don't think... I mean, creatively, or you're talking about 3D specifically?
Well, for example, because sometimes, it's only when you look at it in a big screen where you suddenly go, actually, that could have been, 2 minutes shorter, or, anything like those types of technical things where you look at it and you go, actually, the pace could have been, I could have got away with it.
We did a few screenings, didn't we, to some audiences
Yeah, we
get the feel of it.
I mean, the way we work is we show it as we go. So even at animatic stage, so sort of we cut an animatic together, so that came in, and then we actually showed that on a screen, and got feedback, and so we were doing that through the process, and then we did a version of that, and then we did actually then do cuts, final cuts at the end to try and get the pace, and then in the final mix, you're also working on it, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe there's a few tiny tightenings, but I mean, basically, I don't think I would have.
What I would have done was definitely before delivery of all the animation companies, because all these animation companies had never done a film before, they'd only done on 30-second adverts or maybe a 2-minute personal project, whatever it is. I would have shown them all the final film on a big screen, and that's something we didn't actually. We didn't have time, we didn't have budget to hire a place to do it. Because there was a hell of a lot of creative ownership in this project where they felt really honoured to be a part of it and to do their sequence of the film, and they would give more than anything you could ever pay, because it wasn't like they had to pay for account managers and runners and all this kind of stuff. It was actually the compositors and the animators doing it in their own bedrooms or in their own kitchens, whatever. So, but I would have really shown them the film on a bigger screen, because they'd never ever seen their work on a big screen before, some of these. And then a lot of them had said, "Oh God, I would have changed that, or I would have made that better." But it was more probably their own personal competition with themselves to make it better and better. And I think that was one thing I missed. And personally, there was a couple of companies that I probably wouldn't have commissioned at the end. You learn. That was because I found that they're special effects companies. So they do effects and all this kind of stuff, but weren't very good at narrative. So you kind of learn.
I mean, there was, because it was such a, I mean, directing obviously was a challenge, because ultimately you had to understand that they are directors in their own right. So these are a lot of them are animation illustrators, directors, and also the process of how you make a film with all these different styles is you have to find that balance between you, and also you want to get as many of their ideas as possible. So that was quite a challenge, and we learned very early on that because there's 3 directors, that 3 of us arguing in front of each animator was probably not working, and so we worked out a way of, and there was this bartering system where we basically decided who was kind of point director for each animation, each section, and then would report back to us. But I mean, it was important for us, and it was important for them, because we didn't have a major budget, that we could, and it was that they had a significant amount more, of creative collaboration on their sequences.
These guys will be here to field questions after. I've just got one more quick question to end on. Yeah. How would you assess the provision for young independent filmmakers in the UK who want to shoot in 3D, animated 3D? To what extent are those people helped at the moment, and what does the UK need to do to help those people more, would you say? What would be the key?
Personally, I can answer, I have a couple of other interesting projects that I want to do, and that people approach them with, but I would develop a training program within the film, so a skill-based thing where you're actually working with people to develop the skills, and I think you can find more funding from different areas from personally my level, and also it's more rewarding on a learning process for us creative people out there, and because we're not, we're out there, we need the money to survive, obviously, but it's the big production houses that are earning all the profit. We're not. We just want to do as much work as we can. So that's kind. But I would say, yeah, I develop. I think that's where my heart is too, about getting people and working with them in teams to educate each other, to learn together. So that's my point.
I mean, ultimately, it's difficult because it's where does it go? What are the platforms that? I mean, our film is out there. I mean, it doesn't fit the remit, I think, at the moment of what the main broadcasters of 3D are looking for. So. In the cinema, it's great. So we've got a cinema release, and the cinema, it's different. You could put a film that's a bit more bonkers on the cinema. But I think in terms of broadcast, it's definitely not in the remit at the moment of what broadcasters are looking for. So to do something different and exciting and experimental in 3D, I think is a challenge, because it's where does it go?
Fingers crossed we get there soon. These guys will be here in case anyone has any more questions. But thank you very much indeed for coming down, guys. Really enjoyed it.
No.